What is Neo-Bartitsu? Well, you can't talk about what Neo-Bartitsu is if you don't know what Bartitsu is. Bartitsu was an art developed in the late 1800s by a man named Edward William Barton Wright. He was originally an engineer by trade and traveled all around the world for work. In his travels, he found his way to Japan, where he took up the study of jujitsu and judo. He was so excited and enamored by these arts that he wanted to bring them back to the British public. After a few years, he traveled back to London and he opened up a club where he taught what he referred to as the new art of self-defense. This club taught a combination of the jujitsu style from Japan, as well as pugilism, French savate, Vigny cane fighting. He also incorporated some wrestling style from England as well. Barton Wright brought in several teachers of the self-defense and martial arts from Europe and Japan that could provide the instruction for his club. He opened the doors of the Bartitsu Club in 1899. However, it was short-lived, as by 1902, the club was shut down. The art lived on in his writings and his publications, as well as in fragments of what his instructors went on to teach. Many of these instructors would open their own schools and teach their own methods of self-defense that were somewhat influenced by Bartitsu. Eventually, Barton Wright would pass away in the 1950s, and his art would almost be lost to time. So to summarize, Bartitsu is a mixed martial art combining jiu-jitsu from Japan, boxing from England, savate from France, and Vigny cane fighting. Now that we understand what classical Bartitsu is, we can explain Neo-Bartitsu. Neo-Bartitsu is the modern practice of Bartitsu, often called Bartitsu as it could have been. Barton Wright's original club was focused on experimenting by combining these arts together and pitting them against one another. What we do with Neo-Bartitsu is we continue these experiments and these self-defense practices he derived. We teach elements of the four classic arts that he taught with our own additional self-defense skills that fall in line with Barton Wright's principles for Bartitsu. We start with the basics of boxing and savate, eventually adding in cane skills, and later on incorporating the jiu-jitsu aspects. We have also furthered his experiments and tactics to bring in knife curriculum at the higher levels. To summarize, Neo-Bartitsu is an experimental self-defense focused martial art. We focus on preserving the necessary aspects of classical Bartitsu, but incorporating modern self-defense tactics and necessary knowledge. Now I know what you're wondering. If Barton Wright's club closed in 1902, and he never started teaching again, how do we know about Bartitsu today? Well, for that, we actually have to look back at his time when his club opened. Barton Wright published a lot of written material to publicize his club, to bring in new students. He published across magazines, newspapers, and several other outlets trying to bring in clientele. In the early 2000s, several of Barton Wright's articles were discovered in the British Library, and the archives were republished online by the Electronic Journals of Martial Arts and Sciences website. Several of his articles, particularly Self-Defense with a Walking Stick, started to develop a cult following. Within a year, an international group of researchers dubbed themselves the Bartitsu Society and made it their mission to find out as much about Barton Wright's art as possible. Their aim was to revive the art for the modern day, but also to preserve the legacy of Barton Wright. From 2003 onwards, members of the society, many of whom were martial artists with expertise in related fields, began teaching seminars, highlighting the classical syllabus and canonical materials of Bartitsu, while explaining the best practices and principles of the art. They would go on to release 2 compendiums detailing the techniques of Bartitsu, as we know it was. Today, several Bartitsu and Neo-Bartitsu clubs exist around the world. All of these clubs teach material based on the classical Bartitsu style that was taught at Barton Wright's club. Several of these clubs add to that art, making them Neo-Bartitsu, or place a focus on a particular aspect. As with any martial art, the instructor sets the curriculum and the focus for the club. We are united by a common parent art, but we don't all teach the exact same thing.